G'day, I'm Neil, and today we're going to do a video about replacing the mechanical seal in a Hurlcon CX series pump. I had a look on YouTube and nobody else seems to have documented how to disassemble one of these pumps and do this seal, so I thought, well, I've got to do it, I might as well document it at the same time. This pump's about 9 years old, and the leak of this seal has caused some serious damage to the front bearing on the motor, and it's causing me to actually replace the pump. But it has to do a couple more weeks service until the replacement pump arrives in good condition. Is this a problem you have with your pump? This pump is leaking out of the mechanical seal at the wetback. Here we are with the Hurlcon CX series pump. What we need to do is disassemble the wetback on the pump so that we can get into where the bearing is on the end of the motor shaft. The pump itself has 6 bolts around the edge of the wetback. 4 of these bolts are on the have brass retaining bushes inside the plastic, whereas the other 2 here have a bolt and nut right through the casing. So my approach to taking the wetback off is to take the ones with the internal bushes off first and then remove the nuts. These are 13mm bolts, so try not to pinch the power cord there. Right, we'll get on with doing this. Now I try to put the same bolts back in the same holes that they came out of, so instead of numbering them 1, 2, 3, 4, I tend to put them down on the bench in a pattern and make sure I have the pump in the same direction when I go to put them back. Okay, with the nut and the bolt, you need to use just to get it loose. Once it's loose, it should come out quite easily. Restore the nut to there, and turn the pump around. Do the one on the other side. Power cord keeps getting in the way. Right, once we get those out, we're ready to separate the pump. Turn it around towards the camera as we do this, and should be able to just lever the pump apart, and out comes, there's the wetback with the hole from the skimmer basket, or the leaf basket, and it's got an opening there to stop large things entering. The actual pump itself has a motor mount. Now this engages on the bottom of the pump like so. Alright, so, and then this here is to support the pump. Now when I first came to this pump, and it had been professionally installed by Hurlcon when they did a replacement under warranty of this piece here was installed upside down, and so it was sitting right in the shell here, and so it wasn't supporting the motor body at all. So turning that around the correct way means it is now actually supporting the pump body. So I found that the first time I pulled this apart. Put that over to the side as well. Only goes on one way. Now, as this diffuser doesn't have actually a marking saying where the top is, it does actually have some little marks there. I find it easier just to pick a point here and just mark it with a pen, so you know which way it came back off, so you can put it back on the same way. We take out the 2 screws that hold the diffuser in place. Note that there is a sealing washer around here. You may need to replace that if it's perished. In this case it isn't, so we're going to leave it alone. Okay, 2 screws out, them down there as well, and remove that. There are locating pegs around the outside here, protecting the impeller. To get the impeller off, we have to unscrew it, but because the shaft rotates freely in the motor, we can't do that. At the rear of the motor, if I turn the motor around, you'll find there is a hole, and in this hole there is a slot type arrangement. Now if it's particularly hard, you may need a largish screwdriver, flat blade, to put in there and engage with there and hold the shaft. The first time I undid this motor, I actually put this tri-star screwdriver in the bench vise, sitting upwards, sat the motor on it through here, and then by hand removed the impeller. Right, so I'll turn it back around towards the camera. That in the back of the pump, hold on to that and unscrew it. Because this one's been off recently, and we don't have to do it up very tight, and just turn it anti-clockwise to disengage. Right, so now we have the old seal. Now the old seal comprises of mechanical seal is this bit here, which is a spring loaded seal which pushes against a ceramic filler here. Now the bit that's in this part is the bit that you try not to touch. Now we'll get to replacing that in a little while. We'll just set that aside for the moment. Found spraying the thread that's inside here with some WD-40 helps make sure that things don't stick together too hard. WD-40 being primarily fish oil. There's a lot of corrosion around the shaft in this pump because it's had a lot of leakage over time. There is also a seal around here on this pump as well, the wet back. Again, mine's in reasonably good shape, and if nothing else, just leave it alone. Nothing's protruding out here, so we can sit the motor flat down on its face to remove the rest of the bolts. Okay, so the bolts around the motor. Again, I've numbered these bolts 1, 2, 3, 4 on their heads so that I can put them back in the same positions they came from. It wasn't until I originally removed the pump that it became obvious that the pump was in such a bad condition. We can now lift the pump straight out, and you can see the full scale of the damage that's gone on inside that pump. We also have a front bearing issue in this pump which is grinding away, and originally the pump had seized up. I am also going to replace that down the track, but not today. There's a bearing in here which I've filled up with WD-40 and freed up the pump, and it's now been running for another week for me to get an order in for the new pump, which, as I said, unfortunately arrived damaged in transport, so I've got to make this pump last a little bit longer, otherwise I'll have a green pull. Right, that being done, that's a seal which belongs back on the main bearing, so we'll just put that aside. That's come out as well. Then in the back plate here we have the back of the seal. This is what we want to remove. Now, all the books tell me you put a screwdriver in here and apply a little bit of downward pressure. There it goes. Try and do it evenly from the rear side and push that old seal out. There we are, we've got the seal out, and you have a clean seat for the new seal to go back into. Now, this is the old seal. As you can see, there's obviously signs of water, rusty water, exiting the pump there, and there's obviously where the bottom of the seal has been. Okay, now we're up to removing the old seal. Again, grab the impeller and just grab hold of it and twist it off. It's just an interference fit. There is another rubberized layer here which is doing the actual seal onto the impeller shaft, and then the actual rotating seal is these surfaces here, which made up against that top surface there. Notice I'm still not, even though these are old seals, I'm not touching those surfaces, because again, all the advice is if you touch those surfaces you'll put fingerprints on them, just like dehandling a halogen lamp, and you will cause it to not work correctly. Next stage is I need a set of gloves, and I'll go and get those. I have my gloves on, and what I've also prepared is a piece of wood which can sit in here. So once again, to push this bearing in, I don't need to be touching it. Alright, let's grab the new bearing. Alright, this is the first time I've pulled this out of the bag. First things first, we'll do this piece. Once again, taking care not to touch the actual part of the bearing. So we're just going to slip that on to there and twist it into place. It's reasonably solid, and just doing that until I get down to still a little gap there, and I'm sure once the bearing makes contact and this spring pushes up, that'll push in and we'll be okay. So that's the impeller part of the bearing done. Now for this piece. It's a piece of plastic, again to stop that surface getting touched. Oops, I keep grabbing the plastic here. Right, so it's got a rubber outer seal, to go on the seat. So we can put that in there. Just use a big screwdriver just on that outer seal to push that down all around. Again, not touching the top surface of the seal at all. So I've only been poking the rubber bit with that, checking the back edge. When we look closely in the back edge there, You see the seal is not fully set in fact I can actually see the seal is partly falling out here at the moment. So what I'm going to do is put a bit of paper, just kitchen paper, and I have my block of wood which I've sanded flat on this side and just chamfered the edges a little bit, and I'm just going to push down on that in the hole. By doing that, I'm again not touching it with fingers, and we've pushed that seal home into the back plate. We're about to get into the reassembly phase here. Something I nearly forgot about was some WD-40. Because I've had a lot of issues with this motor already in this area, I will put some in each of the bush holes, a bit on each of the bolts. I had a seal come off when I removed the motor earlier. That sits in front of the bearing, which is shot, but we'll put it back in there for the moment. So it's actually there. There's actually just another piece of that seal which came off last time I had this motor in bits, and I'll put that back there as well, just so it's there. Can't hurt. Every little bit will help water moving up the shaft. Not that it should move up the shaft now because we've got a new rear seal. Because I've put that on there like that, I'm going to set the motor upright as I put this on. The damaged part of the motor, the bottom, is the area here where the plate engages. We've got the new seal here. It's also better to put the wet back, the back of the motor on this way. Check that your seal around the edge here has got no swarf or anything in it, but it allows you to see that when you put it on, that you can just cleanly put the shaft through the middle of the hole without touching anything. What we might also do at this point is put the impeller back on, which will also ensure that the pump seals it. Now I know we haven't put any motor bolts back in yet, but what I did say I was going to do before I would do that screw on is just put a little bit more WD-40 in there. Now I'm putting that in there, holding it hard up against here so that I didn't get any on the new seal. Right, so but the motor's running very cleanly at the moment, so I will turn it over and put the screwdriver in the back. And make sure that's come home. Again, no significant pressure needed there. Now we can put our bolts back in the same order that we took them out. Rotating the motor on the plate. Notice now that we've got the impeller on, the seal will be being looked after by only having the bits touching that should be touching. So bolt 1, bolt 2 are the two good bolts on this motor. They have metal all around them, being that it's not corroded away there, whereas the other parts of this motor have corroded away on the bottom side, and so we are using bolts that have washers on them. Do your nuts up to finger tightness. Once you've got them finger tight, you can use just a little bit of a wiggle to make sure things are centered. Then nip your bolts up. Do 1 and 3, then 2 and 4. These things you don't have to put a lot of pressure on. Notice I'm not holding the the wrench down the length of the handle, so I'm putting less strain on the bushings and just holding the motor in place, which is what they're there to do. Alright, got those done. Turn this around again so we have the impeller on the front of the motor with the new seal, mechanical seal. Now comes time to reinstall the diffuser. Again, just clear off any debris that might be sitting under the pegs. We put a mark on this earlier. There it is. Here it is. So that we make sure we've got it sitting in the right place. Then we can put our two Phillips head stainless steel screws back in place. Once again, these are just holding the diffuser on. Don't have to put any great pressure on them because the locating pegs keep the diffuser from rotating. So we're really just holding it in place. Bearing in mind that all the bolts here are going into plastic, and you can strip plastic really easily. Okay, next, in putting the pump together, we've got to make sure that we don't forget to put the foot on. So the foot, as I mentioned earlier, sits with these notches towards the bottom of the motor. Put that on there, and then this side will come up and hold the far part of the motor. We're going to replace the pump body out of wetback. And at least initially put those bolts in. The bolt head goes on the flat side and the nut goes on the side where it's close to the body of the pump. Interferes with it. Once again, just screw those up finger tight. Don't need to be hanging off a spanner on them. We're just keeping things together so we can put all the bolts in and then go around and tighten them up in a sequence. Earlier on we established the sequence that we pulled the bolts out. Put them back the way they came out. These are the ones that go to the internal bushes. Now they're all finger tight, all round. We can now proceed to do them up. So we just want to put a little bit of pressure on them, and if we count around circumferentially, we want to do 1, 3, 5, then 2, 4, 6. So when you get back to 6, normally you do 1 next, but probably best to go around to 3. Then 5, then 1. Alright, and there it is, back together. Let's go give it a test.